Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 149 of ASBN Live, Why Hydrogen and Why Now? I'm your host, Tulsi Sivalingam, the American Sustainable Business Network's Director of Events and Programming. For this webinar, it's my pleasure to bring on Michael Green, our Director of Climate and Energy, to talk a little bit about why we're here today and who our partners are in bringing this together. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, Tulsi, thanks so much. And thanks for the rest of the Climate and Energy Working Group who helped to bring this to light, this idea to light to do this, and really excited to get to work with a couple of our different partners on talking about the opportunities around hydrogen and its usage. Maybe just start with a little bit of a story and also a little bit of an intro to our working group, and then we'll get into handing it over to some of our speakers to present. But the Climate and Energy Working Group has been hard at work to make sure that we highlight the solutions and the opportunities to transform and decarbonize and adjust equitable and truly low carbon way. One of the opportunities that comes to mind for us is looking at all the different types of solutions that are on our on our table and are available to our businesses and to our members. And when we think about these solutions, we have to look under all of the rocks, because it's really going to take everything to completely transform a fossil fuel driven economy over to something that is going to work and not put our communities, our public health, our business communities, and also our environment at risk. So I'm actually calling to you guys right now. As you can see, I'm in my nice rental vehicle. I'm out in Taos, New Mexico, here at the ski resort. And I actually got to have a conversation with folks who do the net zero pledge here for Taos, the ski resort company themselves. They've decided to be zero carbon by 2030. And one of the things that they were talking about, and one of the challenges that they have, is, as you can imagine, it's a very energy intensive industry. And even more so, it's really energy intensive when we think about some of the machines that have to be way up in the mountains in order to work on grooming the snow and providing and making sure the ski resort is safe for everyone's usage. Now, an electric version of that piston bully snow groomer lasts for about 3 hours with their charge time. So that's not a real solution for a business like them. They need something that can actually be out there and be up on the mountain dealing with those harsh conditions for upwards of 8 hours. So we need to understand what kind of solutions and opportunities are going to be out there for businesses and for hard to abate or hard to decarbonize sectors. Hydrogen really provides an opportunity for us to start to figure out what could be realistic for people like Taos Ski Hill. So I'm excited that, here I'm actually getting to practice and learn a little bit while also zooming in and talking to you guys about, the solution side for folks really kind of dialing in across the country. So maybe before I part and hand it over to our panelists, I'd just like to say, please look up the Climate and Energy Working Group if you haven't already. We have monthly call-ins where we talk about different policy agendas, different opportunities for folks to get involved and raise their business flag on various issues, whether it be something like what you're going to hear about today, or if it's something like the IRA or the EPA regulations that are coming out. We're involved in all of those. So that's a little bit about ASBN's Climate and Energy Working Group. We're really excited to get to host. And now we'll hand it over to our speakers. Who on the speakers is going first? Sorry, I don't have a run of show open in front of me.
I think that next speaker is going to be Maida Sanchez-Shingler.
Thank you. Maida. Thank you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Mike. Hello, my name is Maida Sanchez-Shingler. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Sustainable Business Council, OSBC. It's a nonpartisan statewide coalition of businesses and business networks committed to just and vibrant and environmentally sustainable economy. So we believe hydrogen can move us towards that sustainable economy. It's lightweight, emits only water, and it could store mass quantities, like Mike was saying, mass quantities of electrical energy. Hydrogen storage makes wind and solar energy as reliable as any other. In 2022, last year, Ohio saw a huge expansion of clean energy technology manufacturing facilities, from electric vehicles to batteries to solar panels. And all these were being rolled out in Ohio. So I wanted to highlight here for y'all today a couple of companies that are pushing Ohio forward on hydrogen. The first one is a startup based in Central Ohio called Power to Hydrogen. They make the Clean Energy Bridge, an on-site hydrogen generation and energy storage that's simplified, low cost, and made from earth-abundant materials. They just got me an update this morning. They're currently piloting the technology in Ohio with one of the largest renewable energy installers in the world, Enel Green Power. And then they also are doing an upcoming pilot in Columbus with AEP Electric Power. So that's very exciting. There's another company called Hyperion, which builds advanced green hydrogen fuel cells at their facility in Columbus. And they have an electric hydrogen car with a 1,000-mile range. And then they're working on some mobile hydrogen fuel stations that can dual power battery vehicles as well as hydrogen vehicles. So that's all very exciting, and I'm excited to see that going on in Ohio. And of course, hydrogen can be produced by multiple sources of energy. And that's really important to get us from the current energy reality to a clean energy future. So the transition can start now. Thank you.
Thanks, Maida.
Thanks, Stephanie.
So I'll go next. And Velocity, you're going to pull up my slides here. Thank you. So I am Stephanie Howe, and I echo the welcome from Michael and Maida. We're happy to have you here. And we've enjoyed our partnership with ASBN and OSBC. So this webinar is an outgrowth of Ohio University's support to an innovative local effort in Southern Ohio that aligns with the movement to a just and sustainable clean energy economy. Next slide. At Ohio University, I'm leading the Ports Future program that collaborates with partners to redevelop a U.S. Department of Energy former gaseous diffusion plant in Pike County, Ohio. So this facility has employed thousands of workers in the region for over 70 years, and it was vital to winning the Cold War. It is also an amazing asset that can be leveraged to advance the clean energy economy. Next slide. So as the site is undergoing cleanup and decommissioning, parcels of land and other site assets are being transferred to the DOE designated community reuse organization, and that's known as the Southern Ohio Diversification Initiative. And so their mission is to leverage those assets for economic revitalization in the region. So for over a decade, Ohio University has been partnering with SODI and other stakeholders, you can see some of our partners here, on site readiness activities to accelerate redevelopment. And then in recent years, we've been partnering on engaging with targeted industries that align with the community's preferred future uses for the site. Next slide. So through much work with many different entities and experts over time, that input led SODI and Ohio University to establish what we're calling the Ohio Valley Green Energy and Manufacturing Initiative, or GEM for short. So ours is an all of the above energy strategy. So similar to what the previous speaker said, we're looking at what all possible solutions and how do we integrate and co-locate clean energy production and sustainable manufacturing at one complex. And we can start by deploying existing technologies that we have now and adding other technologies as they become commercialized and scalable. Next slide. So the guiding mission for what we're doing with GEM are the points listed here. We're really trying to achieve the goals of decarbonizing energy production to combat the climate crisis, to promote sustainable and integrated manufacturing, reshoring vital supply chains, strengthening our nation's energy security, and equally as important, creating well-paying union jobs to help grow the middle class. Next slide. So today, our anchor partner for the effort that we're doing in Pike County, Newpoint companies, will speak about their blue hydrogen technology. We'll also hear from Frank Calzonetti at University of Toledo on pink hydrogen, and Nick Connell with the Green Hydrogen Coalition on green hydrogen. So following their remarks, we'll have a panel discussion, and then we'll open the floor to Q&A for webinar participants. So please add your questions to the Zoom Q&A. Next slide. We're also grateful to the local co-sponsors for this webinar. So in addition to ASBN and OSBC, we extend our gratitude to SODI, the Pike County Chamber of Commerce, the Ohio Valley Regional Development Commission, and Amplifier Strategic Communications, who have all been helpful in making this happen. Okay, so next slide. Now I'm going to introduce my esteemed colleague, Mike Zimmer, who will serve as our moderator today. Mike has been an executive in residence with the Wiley School at Ohio University since 2006. His work is focused on energy, environment, corporate sustainability, project finance, workforce development, advanced manufacturing, and economic development issues in the Appalachian region. So Mike has retired within the last few years from a very lucrative and successful law practice. He served more than 5 decades as an expert on energy policy, clean technology, transactions, and finance. And I can mention a few highlights of his career. If I mention them all, it would take the entire hour, but some that might be of interest to this audience. In 2002, he helped form the American Council on Renewable Energy. Next slide. He also led the American Bar Association's Renewables and Distributed Energy Committee from 2008 to 2010. He led the ABA's Energy and Environmental Markets and Finance Committee from 2010 to 2012. And since then, he has served with distinction for many entities that you see here. I won't go through them all. So you can find a lot more out about Mike, his stellar bio, his earlier career achievements at the registration link for this webinar. So at this time, I'm happy to hand things over to Mike to get us started.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you to our sponsors today for bringing this program to us. An important theme that is the foundation of the presentations that follow is focusing in a recognition that different geographies, industries, and even companies within each industry at various stages of their journey on the decarbonization path. Each of those entities have different solutions, different requirements relevant to each geography, each industry sector, and the companies therein to maintain a strategy that is ultimately grounded in economics, in science, and evolving technology, with a reflection and concern for stewardship in the environment, increasingly driven by the power of innovation, of information technology, digitalization, and ultimately the drive for access to capital. These will be themes that we will be continuing to see in the course of the presentations over the next hour, as well as in our subsequent question and answer and discussion period. Our national energy transition success relies on more collaboration, more coordination, cooperation, and honest communication, and less confrontation. This can all be accomplished right now to begin and to start the progress in decarbonizing power generation, manufacturing, and transportation by starting and building upon a logical transition with existing technologies that we work with smarter and with additional capacity and improvement. And the GEM Foundation developed by Ohio University that Stephanie has shared with you is grounded in those core principles. Our webinar today will provide information on current and emerging hydrogen technologies, starting initially with blue hydrogen and progressing in our review to some of the benefits and the opportunities raised by pink hydrogen and ultimately green hydrogen. We're going to explore the differences. We're going to try to create a better understanding, a better improved approach as to why we are looking at these technologies and not just focusing on the what and the how as the program expands. Increasingly, hydrogen represents an important building block in the transition for the future. With a global spend of $150 billion already in place in 2021, that spend is expected to reach $280 billion by 2030, just for hydrogen alone. Different strategies, different outcomes in the states or regions in our own country, as well as on different continents abroad, internationally as well. The private sector is starting to foster and make a major commitment, and that commitment is expanded by the incentives and the direction and the policy starting to unfold by governments, both our federal government as well as governments abroad. And these investments are going to lead to the fostering of the advancement of decarbonization strategies and technologies, building upon what's in place. And I think we will learn the progress that is potentially available to unfold over the next 5 to 10 years to provide a deeper suite of capacities and opportunities to serve those differences that exist in the marketplace that we serve. We want to continue to incentivize, support, and explore the critical short-term as well as mid-term contributions to the decarbonization strategy until these new and additional technologies can flourish and be financed. And our speakers will explain and share those insights with us today. Our first speaker, I'm pleased to introduce, is Wiley Rhodes, the founder and the CEO of Newpoint Companies. Wiley has worked very closely with our colleagues at Ohio University since 2020, and he brings 4 decades of experience in natural gas and hydrocarbons development. His company was founded with his brother in 1999, established in serving the natural gas processing and treatment needs of industry. Since 2015, the focus of Newpoint has grown and expanded to include methane and hydrocarbon emissions and smarter, different ways of managing those important issues for the future. He has also been involved with starting the One Step In Foundation to advance communications between environmental organizations and innovators in the oil and gas industry sector. With his international experience and an eye on developing new technologies, Wiley has focused on advanced blue hydrogen power generation and the elimination of process emissions from oil and gas production and transportation. He also has been engaged in projects in this critical period of time in New Mexico, California, Ohio, and also the state of West Virginia. My pleasure to introduce Wiley to kick off our first formal presentations for this afternoon. Wiley Rhodes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here and to join everybody. First of all, I can't say enough about the leadership from Stephanie Howe and her team in the time that we've been able to work with her on this, developing the opportunities out at Piketon. I'd just like to say that her work has provided the foundation by which all these things become possible. And without her leadership, I doubt we'd even be having a discussion today that not only includes blue hydrogen, but also the vital resources of green and pink hydrogen. So I'm going to go through my presentation pretty quick so we can have plenty of time to spend with Nick and Frank and also time for the questions and answers. So the facility that we're working to develop in Ohio is the one that Stephanie had mentioned at the beginning of her presentation. And so we have 250 acres there, which we're using to develop phase 1. Our partners and equipment suppliers are listed here. CDM Smith's based in Boston. They're an engineering, procurement, and construction firm. They're heading up the management of execution of the project. Our key technology partner being Babcock and Wilcox on the hydrogen-fired power generation steam boilers. The thing that a lot of people don't understand about hydrogen fuel power generation in 2023 is the only thing that you can do with 100% hydrogen today is boil water to generate steam. There's a lot of technologies that are being developed now to get combined cycle turbines up to the ability to run on 100% hydrogen. But our system is set up to use hydrogen as the fuel for everything that we're doing throughout our system, but the power is generated through a steam power generation. We have CO2 sequestration with advanced resources. JWD is doing the electrical substation. We've been working with Shell Catalyst and Technologies on the blue hydrogen POX process. Casale out of Switzerland is the ammonia producers. Linde Engineering is doing the air separation unit. And then we have Medix SMS Group, which is out of South Africa, which is doing the silicon production. The infrastructure and economic impact is really where the foundation of what this opportunity that we're developing with Stephanie and her team in Pike County, Ohio entails. If you look at the graphic there, the red lines demonstrate over 2,100 miles of 765 kVA power distribution capacity. It's the largest power distribution system in the country that has the ability to transport power at that level. Building on that opportunity is the reason that the Piketon site has so much value and why we need to do something with it today. Our system is set up to utilize existing technologies, as Mike said. In the construction phase, we'll have over 1,900 jobs, and in the long-term operations, it'll be over 230. The economic impact to the region for construction is almost $350 million, and then the annual long-term operating economic impact is almost $200 million. Trillium H2 power will produce 500 metric tons per day of clean hydrogen. With the $1 per kilogram production tax credit from the DOE, we'll be able to sell hydrogen into our system for 75 cents a kilogram, which is a very good price. Maida had mentioned in the beginning the developments in green hydrogen and pink hydrogen, and those are all valuable in the long-term opportunities that can be created utilizing hydrogen as the fuel. But we have to get it to where it's economical for middle-income people in our country to be able to capture the value that not only EVs can bring to the environmental objectives, but also what hydrogen can bring. And by having the fuel costs down to a reasonable level in phase one, which blue hydrogen provides, you can start building on that long term. We'll produce 350 metric tons a day of clean ammonia. $900 per metric ton is what we built into the economics. 200 metric tons per day of clean metallurgical grade silicon. The microsilica and the silica slag are byproducts of that process, which also are very valuable in a clean technology advancements manufacturing that are going on in Ohio. And then, as I mentioned, we'll generate 240 megawatts of clean hydrogen power. The financials for our project is a $1.585 billion project. We're raising $330 million from the private investment community. The DOE loan guarantee will cover $2.55 billion. The project at operations is a positive cash flow from the first month. These financials that we've put together demonstrate what the IRR is over a 10-year time frame, and the 10-year time frame is what the DOE has set up for the production tax credits and the 45Q CO2 sequestration production tax credit. Timeline from funding is 42 months. We expect to be operational in first quarter 2027. We want to be able to be sure that we take advantage of the workforce that's out there. In the cleanup of that site, they have about 2,500 union laborers out there right now doing the site cleanup. As that cleanup concludes, we want to be sure we transition those people over to our project, so that way they can stay in the community and continue living in the part of the world that they've enjoyed. One of the things that I think is also important is to look at long-term what we can do at that site after we get phase one up and running. So the organic and coal feedstock is something that are really being pushed right now, and to be able to use those feedstocks in the production of hydrogen, but to do it in support of the low carbon economy that the state of Ohio and the world's chasing. So we think that the technology that B&W has licensed from OSU is a very valuable contribution to that. It's called Bright Loop. You can also, and Newpoint does a lot of work in the biomass, renewable natural gas production for hydrogen. We also want to be able to test turbines long-term as they transition over to 100% hydrogen fuel. So being able to set up a test facility is something else that's very important to add into the plans long-term at Piketon, and then to do the modular SMRs that are also being developed. We'll use the waste heat from the process to produce organic produce that'll be distributed locally. We think that it's a crime in our country that the low and middle income people can't afford to eat healthy. And by being able to use that waste heat to maintain the temperature in a greenhouse year round and to distribute that locally, we think that'll have a very big impact long term on not only the health benefits, but just the attitude in the region. There's so many great opportunities that'll be built from the work that Stephanie and her team has done, and we're happy to be a part of that. And that's my presentation. I'll look forward to Mike and or to Nick and to Frank.
Thank you, Wiley, for that concise and very well developed presentation of the blue hydrogen approach being undertaken by Newpoint at the Piketon facility in Portsmouth, Ohio. We're privileged to have our next speaker, Dr. Frank Calzonetti, who joined the University of Toledo in 2001 as their Vice Provost for Research, and he currently is Vice President for Research while also serving as a professor of geography at the University of Toledo. He's held a series of leadership positions at the university and has served as a member of the president's cabinet since 2006. Before coming to Toledo in Ohio, he served in state government within West Virginia and has also held numerous positions at West Virginia University for over 20 years in West Virginia before coming to Ohio. Dr. Calzonetti is the author of 3 books on energy facility siting and over 40 reference journal articles on siting, industrial location, as well as regional energy economic development. He's also served as chief investigator, project manager on a wide range of research funding assignments, including engagements with the National Science Foundation, NASA, the Army Research Office, Argonne National Laboratories, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the U.S. Department of Commerce, as well as AP and the state of West Virginia. Frank Calzonetti, the floor is now yours. Welcome, and thank you for being able to join us today.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to try to share my screen and is that showing the full screen mode? I'm good? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is provide an overview of project that resulted in our submitting an application to the DOE just on the 7th of this month. And so I'll just advance my slides. Okay. Let me see here. Okay. So the way we got involved here, the University of Toledo really is not the lead of this project, but we have been a convener of Great Lakes Clean Hydrogen. And so this goes back to an event we had on campus back in October 2019. We had what is called National Lab Day, where we invited directors and the leaders from the national laboratories to campus to meet with people at the university and with other people in the community. And so we had the directors of 10 of the national labs here on campus. And at that time, I had an opportunity to sit down with the director of the Idaho National Lab and discuss a project that they had underway at the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant over in Oak Harbor, which is on the shores of Lake Erie, about 30 miles to the east of Toledo. And so they were working on a demonstration project at that time to see ways to produce additional sources of revenue when electricity prices were soft, so that, as you know, nuclear power plants are baseload power plants. And so in the middle of the night on a Sunday night at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's not a great demand for energy. So the idea is at those off-peak times, send the electricity to an electrolyzer, produce valuable hydrogen and also oxygen. So this project began actually 2019, and Davis-Besse engineers started working with people at the Idaho National Lab to see how this could work out with respect to the configuration of the nuclear power plant, the location of substations, switchyards, but also making sure that it didn't interfere with the operation of the nuclear power plant, the safety considerations, and also NRC issues. So we got involved in this project as well at the university. And as we got involved, we started to explore who would be interested in this hydrogen. And it didn't take us very long to find a lot of interest in Northwest Ohio, companies that were interested in purchasing hydrogen. And I'll get into that in a second. So what we did is that we convened a team pulling together the national labs. In addition to Idaho, we started working with Pacific Northwest National Lab, Oregon, Lawrence Livermore, NREL and others, and also brought in other universities like in Ohio. Case Western was there at the very beginning, and also community colleges because this was turning into a somewhat complicated project. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what we did is we had a number of workshops, 3 of them. You can see the dates there in January 2020, December 2021, and 2022, where we invited speakers from throughout the country and also brought in people from our region to talk about the opportunity for hydrogen and looking at issues there. And we, of course, responded to the DOE's RFIs. They had 2 opportunities to submit RFIs, which we did July 2021 and March 2022. So we were actively engaged in that process. We also were invited by the people in the state of Michigan to participate in the Michigan Hydrogen Workshop, which was back in May of 2022. And that was organized by people in state government, the University of Michigan, and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And we had a great opportunity up there to talk about ways to expand our initiative into the state of Michigan. So in November, of course, we submitted a concept paper, and we were encouraged by the DOE to submit the application, which we submitted on the 7th. So what we learned through this process of engagement is we found that there were strong industry commitments to decarbonization. And so irrespective of what happens in Washington in terms of the direction that energy policy goes, a number of companies are committed to decarbonization. And a number of the companies that we've talked to have an international footprint. So not only do they want to do it for the good reason, because they understand the importance of that, but they must do it with respect to some of their operations overseas. So there is really tremendous demand for decarbonization. And we also found that tremendous demand for low carbon hydrogen, and also oxygen is of great interest. In talking with industry and with the national labs and the universities, there's technical questions. Now, the opportunity for the hydrogen hub doesn't support R&D. It's clear that this is industrial deployment and community benefits. There's not support for R&D, but there is a lot of opportunities for R&D work through other programs from the Department of Energy. And this is going to be important for these hubs moving forward to address some of these technical questions. We have to figure out a way of having the cost of hydrogen at a price point that's going to be of interest. And that's something that our hub is focused on. We believe, and this has already been said, that Ohio and Michigan, the Midwest, well-positioned to be a hydrogen hub. And also, we have been working on this for a number of years. So we have a demonstration project underway, which places us in a pretty good position. So we were working for a number of years with a consortium of companies and laboratories and universities on this request. And one of the companies was Linde. And as you know, they were already mentioned before. They have tremendous experience in working with hydrogen. And so they stepped forward as the prime applicant and had the ability to provide a lot of the cost share for this. Other major recipients would be Energy Harbor. Energy Harbor is the company that operates the Davis-Besse nuclear plant, the Beaver Valley plant in Pennsylvania, and also the Perry plant. So it's critical to have a source of electricity, and they will provide that. Cleveland Cliffs Steel Plant, which is outside of Toledo, a major consumer and off-taker of the hydrogen. GE Aerospace in aviation. GE Aerospace is looking out 10, 15 years or more to see the way to use hydrogen for jet aircraft. They see that hydrogen may be one of the few ways that they can use to get the carbon reductions needed for jet aircraft. Owens, Illinois, headquartered here in Toledo, and others in the glass industry locally and regionally are part of it. They use a lot of natural gas in their furnaces, looking to decarbonize. And we at the University of Toledo, we're taking the lead on the community benefits and the life cycle analysis work. In conjunction on the life cycle analysis, that's actually led by Michigan Tech University, but we're working with that. But we, as I'll say, we have a number of other industry, university, and national lab partners. So our plan is to produce pure hydrogen from nuclear energy in the immediate term, but moving toward solar energy moving forward. So we have a commitment from Energy Harbor to produce the energy needed to hit the 100 tons a day goal we're hitting. And renewable energy is very important for Northwest Ohio. First Solar is located here. Toledo Solar is located here. We at the University of Toledo have a major solar energy research program. So we view that moving forward, solar energy is going to be also very important. We don't have any need for sequestration because it's pure hydrogen through electrolysis. So what our plan is to, and I can't really go into a lot of the business proprietary information, but Our plan is to start with a 2 megawatt system, perhaps as early as 2024, to beyond 250 megawatts, and producing at the Davis-Besse site in Oak Harbor liquefaction and compressed gas for pipeline, and also liquefaction for shipping hydrogen. We have local demand, significant local demand, but demand, for instance, GE Aerospace down in Cincinnati, that would have to be trailered down there. So working on power purchase agreements from nuclear power plants to electrolysis at the industrial sites. And also, as I mentioned, the idea is to produce additional hydrogen from solar energy. And going out to the future, we also, was mentioned modular nuclear. We are working with the University of Michigan. They have a tremendously strong nuclear engineering program, looking at what is the next generation of nuclear energy that can support hydrogen. So in terms of our region, there's tremendous nuclear capacity. I could have mentioned the transmission grid, and the transmission grid started here in Ohio, and it's very strong. We're a leader in solar energy. The DOE really wants to see a union workforce support it, and so we have that in spades. Our companies are pretty much union shops. We have in Ohio a number of very strong engineering construction firms. We are right now working with hydrogen. We have refineries here in Toledo working with hydrogen. And we have higher education institutions working on workforce development. At the community colleges, they will be working on the skilled trades with the unions, and the universities in higher education, and not just engineers and scientists, even though they will be produced. But we believe that training for people in business and other areas will be very important for them to understand how to engage with hydrogen. We have, again, national laboratories have been with us since day one, and they are very helpful, and they have strength, not just in the technical areas, but in community benefits, Justice 40 issues. And our region really has some of the strongest concentration of engineering programs probably in the world. And, you know, I would think Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, you know, we have a lot of very strong engineering programs. Also, there really is a DOE really wants to see DEI and environmental justice needs addressed. So that's very critical to what we have in mind here. We see this rolling out. We see ourselves being connected to other hubs as they expand. But the feature that we have is high purity hydrogen produced by electrolysis that we think is in great demand. And so we don't really have to get involved with the carbon capture and sequestration that I know a number of hubs are working with. Again, the university research centers have these linkages, and we really recognize the importance of stakeholder engagement and community engagement that is important for the DOE. And so this is kind of a busy chart here, but this shows you how we are organized. I mentioned that the prime applicant is Linde. And on the left side, you'll see the industrial deployment, which takes most of the budget, of course, for the industrial deployment. And on the right-hand side, the community benefits that we at the university are organizing, working with our partners. Another thing I would add is that we believe that it's important to have a dedicated entity focused on community benefits. So we have already organized a 501c3 in the state of Ohio to address that. So you can see some of the universities we're working with and some of the community colleges. So the University of Michigan, Michigan State, the University of Cincinnati, Case Western, Wayne State, Central State University. So we feel that we have a number of tremendously strong partners to help move this forward. And I think
Frank, let's bring this down to our next presentation. Thank you very much for that introduction to pink hydrogen. The important point that the funding programs that Frank's working with and our speakers are working with are focused on deployment right now. They're focused on execution. They're focusing on building communities, not research and development, which is a whole separate initiative independent of the Inflation Reduction Act, of the Infrastructure Act, which is managing these opportunities. Thank you, Frank, for those insights. Our next speaker, before we get to a brief question session and then the longer questions to follow, is Nick Connell, the Interim Executive Director of the Green Hydrogen Coalition, who will speak to us on that topic today. Nick's responsible in his role for both internal and external aspects of the Green Hydrogen Coalition's policy, regulatory activities, as well as the management and operations of the strategy for that organization in seeding a strong foundation for green hydrogen in the future. He has extensive experience in the energy industry, has held senior positions in a variety of organizations, including Southern California Gas, Southern California Edison, and AMS. Nick brings a perspective grounded in his background as a master's in business administration, focusing on business development and a regulatory perspective that he will share with us today. Nick, the floor is now yours.
Perfect. Michael, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for allowing me to join today and join the distinguished panels, Frank and Wiley. I really appreciate it. A lot of perspective there, so I could probably breeze over some of those topics that were previously discussed. So in my agenda, I'm going to give a quick overview of the Green Hydrogen Coalition, some green hydrogen basics, defining green hydrogen, which is a very critical topic right now within the hydrogen industry, and then also what progress is required for the market to move forward, and then some of the potential for green hydrogen in the future. So a little bit about the Green Hydrogen Coalition. Our mission is to facilitate policies and practices to advance the production and use of green hydrogen in all sectors where it could accelerate a carbon-free energy future. The Green Hydrogen Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So when we think about green hydrogen and its applications, from the other panelists, we saw a lot of these different applications come up between ammonia production for fertilizer, industrial applications, heavy-duty trucking, ports, maritime shipping, aviation, even firm dispatchable power in the power generation, which we see as one of the near-term opportunities for green hydrogen. And like what I would like to touch on around green hydrogen is we have to think about, hydrogen, if it's pink, if it's blue, if it's green, this is just another tool in our toolkit to help decarbonize our energy future. It is not in a direct replacement or in direct competition of electrification. Rather, it is just another tool that we could use to meet our federal and state goals. And so real fast on green hydrogen production, at the Green Hydrogen Coalition, we see green hydrogen being produced either through electrolysis, what Frank touched on, using either in some cases, you could use solar, wind, or hydro, using an electrolyzer and converting that to hydrogen, or in other cases, which Wiley touched on, is biomass applications. So using thermal gas conversion of biomass. In those cases, it's carbon negative. So it's even lower carbon intensity than some of the solar or wind applications that you would see through electrolysis. And what I would like to touch on is where we are in the industry, especially as we look to the federal government, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IIJA. It's defining hydrogen based on its colors can be great for conversational use, but once we start using this as a key energy asset or a decarbonization asset, we really need to look at the carbon intensity. Because when it comes to the carbon intensity of the hydrogen, it's really associated with the greenhouse gas emissions that are being produced. So moving to a more quantifiable indicator, we see that being an easy way for us to talk apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. Because through these, as you can see on the left-hand side, all the colors, this is just one opinion, but others have different opinions. So for example, some organizations or environmental justice groups may think green hydrogen is only by electrolytic process, but the Green Hydrogen Coalition sees biomass as an opportunity. But if we were to talk about a carbon intensity framework, like how it's proposed in the Inflation Reduction Act, it gives us a clear way to see, what is the carbon intensity, how is it being produced, and it really allows for technology neutrality. So one thing I want to leave individuals thinking about is the carbon intensity and the different considerations we need to make when we talk about hydrogen, especially around a green hydrogen framework. So does it support non-fossil fuel feedstock diversity? Is it a quantifiable methodology? So how are we looking at how it's being produced and how are we calculating them? Another big one is around the life cycle impacts. If we look at carbon intensity only at the point of production, there could be a lot of upstream impacts, which Frank was touching on like carbon capture. So if we're not looking at those upstream impacts, it may have a more climate negative impact rather than actually providing some climate integrity. The next one that we really like to hone on is technology neutrality. We don't think there's one technology or one source of producing hydrogen that is going to be the be-all, say-all. We just have to start looking at the different technologies that could provide a climate benefit at a low carbon intensity. And then ultimately, where we want to get is how could this be certified? How could this be used to, say, a state's renewable portfolio standards goals? How could this be used for end users like your large Walmarts, your Targets, to use that toward their ESG goals? So really going through this method, creating a carbon intensity framework that looks at the whole life cycle emissions really gets you that certification methodology. And I'm not going to jump too far into this, but I just want to tee this up is really looking at when you're assessing the climate integrity of hydrogen is to ensure that you're looking at the upstream emissions as well as the upstream transport emissions, as well as the hydrogen production emissions. So a key example would be if you had an electrolyzer, but your electrolyzer was not co-located, in the case where Frank is co-locating electrolyzer with solar production. If that electrolyzer is grid connected and that average grid mix is using, say, coal or natural gas, and you're producing that hydrogen, it may actually be dirtier than the electricity itself. So you have to really look at what are those upstream impacts to ensure that the hydrogen you're producing is providing benefit as well as meeting your state's objectives. So to get there, progress is really required to achieving a green hydrogen economy. And I really appreciate Wiley's perspective is, we can't get there today and we have to take those steps. We really see that there's market mechanisms that we could put in place today to start producing green hydrogen and creating a valuable market. But to get there, we need to have different policy as well as mechanisms in place to establish that. I won't go into detail on all of these, but really it allows us to start matching the hydrogen being produced with that renewable resource. And it allows us to address those near-term barriers due to lack of built infrastructure. And just from green hydrogen's potential, green hydrogen costs, are going to, potentially by 2030 be negative, or in some cases, like super, super low to where it's going to outcompete fossil fuel resources for hydrogen production. But again, it's going to take time. We think, the federal signals that are going on today, as well as what states are putting forward, Frank looking at the hydrogen hub efforts, it's really creating mass scale in order to drive economies of scale. So with that, I know, Michael, we're trying to keep it brief, but we do every year have our Catalyst H2, and we would welcome everyone on this panel to join and have that conversation of how we move this economy forward. With that, Michael, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Nick, for that concise, very effective presentation on the opportunities and some of the different strategies and ways to think and approach green hydrogen and building for the future. I have a parting question before we go into the detailed questioning, but I might ask, we have a lot of focus on production, the supply issues, a lot of focus on emissions and the various emissions control benefits of different hydrogen strategies. Is there a need on the other side to have a more distinct, clear understanding of the demands for hydrogen, the markets for hydrogen, the end uses, and how that fit ultimately into our economy as a building block for the future, to be competitive for the future, as well as to provide a logical, orderly transition for a future that is not disrupted by cost, is not disrupted by a delay, is not disrupted by all the other variables associated with the decarbonized transformation we see. We switched just there for a minute on that end use demand and where we see that demand building for the future. Nick, why don't you start there, Wiley, and then Frank?
Yeah, I would say, you know, as a good strategy, especially when we look at various end uses, we should really start with the low-hanging fruit. Those that we know do not have an alternative to electrification, or in some cases, electrification may not make cost-effective sense. That could be your heavy-duty trucking, your ammonia production, most industrial processes due to the process heat, and just, you know, electrification is not that possibility. I also think long-term gas planning. Regardless, we're going to need to have firm, reliable power in the future in order for us to keep the lights on. You know, we could have high renewable penetration, but due to the intermittent nature of it, we need to solve for that reliability issue. And so I know Wiley was touching on the conversion of, you know, thermal generating facilities. So when we start looking at these low-hanging fruit, we need to start developing a plan not only to incentivize, but to send signals. So that really requires a lot of state agency activities to start sending those signals for us to begin transitioning that.
Wiley, quick thought, and then Frank to conclude on the hour. Wiley, your microphone.
Thank you. The biggest opportunities is supplying chemical feedstocks to the existing facilities and converting the existing power generation, both natural gas and coal, to blend in a percentage of hydrogen. In our project in Central Ohio, there's over 4,500 metric tons a day of offtake potential in the region in those three markets. And so whenever you look at from a decarbonization standpoint, that's impactful. It's almost 40 metric tons per day of carbon emission reductions, and that's taken into consideration the life cycle emissions, which both Frank and Nick had mentioned.
Frank, your observations to conclude on the hour are important, recognizing we're retiring on a continuous basis some of our baseload capacity. On the nuclear side, 50% of our coal capacity will be retired by the mid part of this decade over the prior 10 years. Your thoughts on the end use demands going forward?
I think where we're coming from is that we found that the demand was enormous. The supply is more of a challenge. So when you start looking at the demand, the industrial demand, I mentioned steel, glass, but also power generation, substituting hydrogen for methane. You start talking about the quantities needed for that, and companies are interested in that at a price point. So that is where the DOE is very interested in the techno-economic assessment. They want to see that information. So driving down the price is very important. But also one of the challenges I think that we're seeing with the hydrogen hubs is where is the immediate supply going to come from? And you're correct when you're talking about the retirement of coal-fired power plants. And I don't think we're going to see very many new pressurized water reactors being built. And a number of nuclear power plants, at least in our region, the Midwest, have contracts. So they're really tied up with contracts. So that's a question. So moving forward, I think the DOE is right to focus on economies of scale, driving down the price by economies of scale. But also innovation is important. So we need to do a lot more work on, how can we incorporate high temperature electrolysis into nuclear facilities? It's complex because you're dealing with the NRC. What does the future look like? And so I think there's some outstanding questions. But again, the long and short of it is that the demand right now is far outstripping the supply, as far as I can tell.
We're at the hour. We will continue our discussion through till 2:30 in a more deep, intensive fashion. Those that must sign off, thank you for joining us today for this program sponsored by our network here with Ohio University and the American Sustainable Business Network. The next question, should we be looking at what are the top 2 or 3 risks in your different approaches to hydrogen that you feel need to be managed in the short to midterm? And that, of course, is critical ultimately to attract the capital you require to perfect having these different technologies available, as well as getting that technology to scale, because that is going to be required. Both several of our speakers have noted we're replacing nuclear at baseload. We're replacing coal at baseload. We're managing an intermittent new product coming online with the intense increases in renewable energy, which we want and need. But we have an opportunity to address that intermittency to get it to an intermediate and potentially a baseload end product outcome, as well as the new requirements for electricity, electric vehicles in our new buildings, as well as the increased demand for cooling on a going forward basis. So what are the key risks that you feel you face, Wiley, in blue hydrogen, and how you can address those to get the scale as you're proposing? And then Frank, and then Nick.
Well, thank you, Mike. The biggest thing I think that we all face is infrastructure, getting feedstocks in and getting the final product out. Whenever you start looking at our type of infrastructure requirements, being the natural gas feedstock, the CO2 sequestration, and then the infrastructure to actually distribute that product, there's going to be a lot of work that's going to need to be done, and it's going to need to be done in a very short period of time in order to be able to meet the emission goals that our country has established. And we support the Biden administration and Secretary Granholm and all the work they're doing in those objectives. But so I think, Mike, to answer your question, it's just to be able to depend from an investment and operations standpoint that the infrastructure that is required to not only get everything in, but to also get the final product out, whether that be pink, green, or blue hydrogen. There's going to need to be a distribution network, and it's exactly the same. There's no difference in the hydrogen molecule between blue, green, and pink. And that's an important distinction that I think we need to be sure we understand.
The distribution and certainty in terms of planning horizon, the 10, 15-year planning horizon as well, Wiley.
Exactly.
Maida, before we go to Frank, the observations from your membership and what you're seeing in Ohio.
Yes, I think we're seeing a lot of openness towards hydrogen among the business community, and our organization mostly works with small businesses. But there again, to echo what other speakers have said, the price point is important for the small businesses to be able to adopt these technologies and move their fleets over and whatnot, and that's critical. Absolutely.
Well, we want to have a transformation that manages force majeure, geopolitical risk, but also price majeure in terms of outcomes where all of a sudden we're no longer cost competitive in terms of narrow options. We aren't competitive with who we are dealing with in other markets, whether that's in Europe or Asia, as well as your point, Maida.
Absolutely.
Frank, the floor is yours. On the question of risk, the management of the top 1 or 2 risks you see for pink hydrogen, and you have a nice head start on scale a little bit, but have you also thought of adding stuff like combined heat power and those types of tools to support the underlying strategy?
Yes, we have looked at that. Of course, we're trying to roll out projects that we believe are implementable over the next 8 years or so. Some of the biggest risks we see, number one, as I mentioned before, as the nation moves toward electric vehicles, where is the electricity coming from? So that is something that we have tremendous support from Energy Harbor, but what is the future for nuclear power? Again, I don't think we're going to see pressurized water reactors being constructed. So that is something we're looking at. One opportunity, we're talking to people in Canada. We shouldn't just say that hydrogen is devoid of international collaboration across Canada. There's a lot of interest in a lot of electricity supply in Canada. Another is, for instance, I talked about electrolyzers. Are we going to be able to produce the number of electrolyzers, the quantity needed when we start scaling up? One thing that I think we're seeing is that these hydrogen hubs are going to be a magnet for investment. So there's a lot of international European companies that are interested in what we're doing here. We'll see some scale up, but it's not going to happen overnight. Two other things, the workforce. How long does it take to get things, the infrastructure in place? Is that going to be a challenge? And government policy. If the federal policy changes so that there's no more carrot or no more stick, what type of signal is that going to take? I mentioned that our corporations are committed to this, but again, it depends upon the timing, the price point, and where the signals are from the federal government.
Nick, your perspective on risk and getting to scale regarding your green hydrogen strategies and opportunities.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. I think to Wiley's point, it's really, regardless of the hydrogen, it's the transport of the hydrogen and it's the storage of the hydrogen. Currently, right now, you think about interstate pipelines, there's no clear jurisdictional authority of who mandates those. Either it's 100% or it's blended. In state, we have the issue of, can you use natural gas infrastructure not to blend, but to repurpose to 100% dedicated? And so having that, and we know that geologic salt caverns are the cheapest way to store hydrogen. If we're having these thermal generating facilities and we need to store the hydrogen on site, how are we going to do that? Are we going to do that? We're going to have containers on site and so forth. So I think there's a risk of really driving down that scale if we can't get the needed infrastructure in place and have those policies in place with clear signals to allow us to do so. Just to point out, I just released a report earlier this month around high build LA. So we created a vision for LA to get to sub $2 per kilogram keyword delivered in the LA basin to support LA's 100% renewable goals. And we did a full system planning, jobs analysis. And the biggest key that we found from that is the infrastructure. So it's the dedicated pipelines as well as the storage. So I'll drop that report in the chat too, if anyone's interested.
Thank you for sharing that, Nick. A quick question from our audience to share regarding the Green Hydrogen Council and group that you represent. How is organized labor represented in your activities and efforts in the green hydrogen space? Or perhaps others would like to speak to that important issue as well.
Yeah, we have complete backing from labor right now on all the activities we're doing, even legislation. We're having labor organizations that are coming out and openly supporting our future goals. Labor is seeing this as an opportunity for family sustaining jobs as a transition for those that say work at a thermal generating facility, work in the industrial sector, as a clear transition to not only maintain jobs, but grow jobs. When we think about the infrastructure, what I touched on, all that's going to require jobs. And I think, Wiley touched on it too, like you saw all these new jobs that are going to be growing out of this, as well as the continuation. So labor is definitely in support. I think a lot of the hydrogen infrastructure is not so much different than the oil and gas industry. So this is a clear transition as we go into a decarbonized future.
Well, let's move. Thank you, Nick, for that comment or observation. Wiley, you want to speak to labor role and engagement as well from your work and experience at Newpoint?
Sure. And, I can't say enough good about the labor organizations and how supportive they've been from day one. Of course, they wanted to understand what our plan was and what the long-term objectives were from a social and environmental standpoint, but what did it look like from a time frame on jobs? And that was the driver that we worked with Stephanie and her team so closely on over the last almost 3 years. What can we do today? And life cycle emissions is a very important analysis that needs to be conducted at every stage of this hydrogen development. Our project reduces the carbon intensity of over 95%, life cycle emissions, and using natural gas as the feedstock. So that's a substantial number. It's not perfect, but it's a good start that we can implement today to create the jobs that we can keep in Pike County and get these people that transitioned from the local labor organizations that are there now to the project for TH2 Power. So we can't say enough good about the support that we've gotten from the local labor organizations.
Maida, any comments from your perspective? And then the next question I'm going to lead to Frank, because I know that the labor component is heavily integrated in his work in the pink hydrogen space.
Yes, I just wanted to echo, I think Stephanie might be able to speak to this question of how the involvement of labor. I know they have been quite involved in the Pike County efforts. Stephanie?
Yeah, Stephanie, you want to add your perspective?
Sure. Yes, they've been absolutely vital in advancing this project. We have an organized labor steering committee, the labor leaders in Ohio. They've been very active, very vocal, very educated and knowledgeable. They've really done a lot of extra work to help be supportive of moving this forward. And the impacts will be beyond just Pike County. It'll be a regional impact. So, that's an important thing to point out as well, because, labor markets and commerce markets don't stop at the county border's edge. So they see the vision in terms of how this can be transformative. And they've really gone beyond any expectations to really work to support all aspects of what we're doing. And we're very, very grateful for their participation and support.
Thank you, Stephanie. Let's move on to an audience question. One of our members in the audience observed that Wiley Rhodes' point in his commentary that hydrogen is hydrogen irrespective of the method of preparation, blue, pink, and ultimately green, is very important to recognize. The Treasury Department is grappling with this issue right now and providing guidance for the hydrogen tax credit that they have under development. There were some differences in the policymaking process setting up these provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, and that guidance is going to be the foundation of proposed rules from the Treasury that'll provide some certainty and some better guidance from Treasury expected third quarter for hydrogen, those rules in 2023. Frank, you want to add or comment on that observation and that these distinctions, and David had a nice comment and chart on that. He might want to add to that discussion as well. Right.
Well, hydrogen is an element, so it's hydrogen is hydrogen is hydrogen. Of course, there's the isotopes of hydrogen. I don't think we're talking about that. But the fact is, once you produce a hydrogen and it's pure hydrogen, then that's what you have. But if the hydrogen has some level of impurity, that's when you start having issues. And so built into our plan is the recognition of getting the production tax credit. through the IRA. And I think that it's going to be very helpful for both the green hydrogen and for the hydrogen produced from nuclear power plants. So that is very attractive. And I guess the question would be, moving forward, is that enough, even without the funding for the infrastructure from the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations? But that is something that we are calculating in to be a benefit to our hub, both for the nuclear and for the hydrogen being produced from solar. Again, we're producing our hydrogen from electrolysis, so you don't have the challenges that you face from fossil fuel generated hydrogen.
Frank, on that point, a quick question. How long do you think that you would be operating on nuclear before you make the transition ultimately to solar? What time frame?
No, I think we'll see both.
You'll see both, okay.
Yeah, we're not going to walk away from solar. I think, from nuclear. We have a commitment from Energy Harbor, and they have, again, 3 sites that they have. So there's a commitment for the long term from Energy Harbor to provide the electricity that we need to be successful. But we believe that, moving forward 5-10 years from now, a ramp up of solar energy and also wind, but our interest, just because of our regional interest, is solar. I mean, it's an important industry to Northwest Ohio. We see one of the challenges around solar is that the demand is unbelievable, and the amount of production coming out of the plants that we have in the United States that are operating on U.S.-based technology, the global demand is more than what can be accomplished with respect to using additional solar in the short term for electrolysis.
Well, and to get better security, economic and national security on access to solar panels for the future through insourcing and supporting the growing manufacturing interests that are arising both in Ohio, but also in the wider region.
Right, and so we have very much interested in, for instance, cadmium telluride and perovskite-based solar cells, which is U.S. technology for the most part. We're trying to protect that technology. China came in 20 years ago and decided they wanted to take a leadership position in solar, and they have been successful. So that's important for us in terms of the national security, but also the economic security as well. Plus, we see this as a great opportunity for Ohio. I mean, solar energy production is fantastic in terms of the jobs producing and the innovation around that.
Nick, you had a great slide on this point, and some of the more standardized tests or approaches that could be part of the evaluation process in terms of assessing the stewardship, the economics, the scientific underpinning for the choices that the market will make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to Frank's point, the molecule is the molecule once it's produced. I think what is the real distinction on hydrogen is the upstream, the feedstock. So when we think about the well, where it's coming from all the way to the gate, once it goes from the gate downstream, it's all the same. So really where you're having your major impacts is at that gate and above it. So it's important, like the IRA, it identified a well to gate methodology for the life cycle assessment. So looking at that, if you're using CCUS, in the case you're using, natural gas to produce it, you could ensure that you're capturing it until I think it's like 95%, you would still qualify for the IRA. So you're really providing a climate benefit, but we have to remember that in order to grow the hydrogen market, we have to do it in a way where there's transparency and we are moving towards climate integrity. Because if we don't, we're going to be considered, greenwashing or whatever oil and gas industry has been criticized for. I mean, I came from Zimmer Energy for 9 years, and I've heard that side of it. And hydrogen, as we move this market, we just need to ensure that we're working together. I saw in Frank and Wiley's presentations the community benefits. working with environmental justice communities, making sure that we get all this worked out. And I think, to me, that perspective is really huge, is ensuring that anything and how we produce it, we're have complete transparency and that everyone has access to that transparency.
Great point. Let's transition to another audience question. And we've kind of alluded to, let's focus a little bit on the transportation, the distribution point. We're also going to need to deal with safety issues that are distinctive or unique with hydrogen. What is the discussion in terms of the state, federal level regarding the indemnities, or how is the insurance industry proposing to deal with this topic? And we have interesting experience here in this panel. Frank, of course, from the nuclear industry perspective at Davis-Besse. Wiley, I know this is an important issue, the transportation distribution that you focus on. We have focused on this at OU before we turn to the question by an integrated energy strategy of trying to locate and get clusters together wrapped around these sources of energy to limit the need for transportation, the life cycle analysis impact of that, vitiating the value of what we're creating, and neutralizing that, to Nick's point as well. Wiley, your thoughts on the transmission, the risk management issues there, and what you're seeing in the marketplace in terms of how that question's being handled.
Well, it is an issue, and it's something that as this market develops, we're going to have to dig in more. Whenever you're starting something that doesn't exist anywhere today, there's a lot of things that need to be researched and understood. Hydrogen has been transported by pipeline for decades, just not over long distances because there was never a market for it. So the life cycle emissions that have been mentioned a couple of times, it's easy to look at the oil and gas industry because oil and gas is developed in the U.S. So we know it in the general public, understand what life cycle emissions represents. But the transportation piece of it in life cycle emissions is taking everything all the way across the spectrum into account. And that is mining of the steel for the infrastructure, the elements that it takes to manufacture batteries. All those things are things that everybody is researching now. And the insurance industry is really, reluctant to make commitments that are not very, well, they're all very expensive, but they're the things that we have to do now. And because you have to be able to insure these facilities in order to be able to get the investment. So the way that we approach ours and what we can go back and do today is taking existing facilities that now operate in different parts of the world and bringing those to Pike County and setting those up. In order to be able to really penetrate the market, we have to be able to create products that the middle income can afford. And that's a big driver in every aspect of this being successful. In order to be able to do that, you have to be able to transport that product in mass quantity. And mass quantity is a clean hydrogen distribution infrastructure that goes out from the centralized production facilities and penetrates the market. Without those hydrogen pipelines, it's going to be very difficult to get the life cycle emissions down to the levels that we all need to strive for.
An important point there, the life cycle analysis, very technical, but it also includes an element of the socioeconomic impact of the choices we are making, which goes to the affordability issue, which is increasingly a paramount concern we're seeing flowing out of COVID, as well as secondly, 66% of the population managing their expenses in their families week to week, every 2-week paychecks that they're managing. This becomes an important element of that life cycle analysis going forward as well. Some strategies to give cognizance to that some kind of balance, some kind of economic rationality behind what we're doing as well. Maida, comment on that, the transport, the unique risks, safety, health questions associated with hydrogen.
Well, I'm not a technical person, so I don't have all the details on the safety of transporting hydrogen. I know that a lot of fossil fuels have been transported for a long time, and we had a lot of safety protocols in place for those. There's a lot of gas and being transported, and I do understand that part of that is the way that hydrogen burns. It can be mitigated, and there is a lot more safety as far as transporting it via tanker and so forth than even some of the fossil fuels that we use currently. So I think that the industries will find solutions to that, just like they have for other types of fuels.
This is an issue that has risen and elevated to the forefront. I know Stephanie is managing at the Voinovich School with our colleagues at the Russ College of Engineering and our Corrosion Center and our unique world class experience in managing the issues with hydrogen, both and the impacts of that on existing pipelines, as well as the impact on handling that, transporting that fuel going forward. Nick, your comments and observations on the transportation piece, and then to Frank, I'd like each speaker, starting with Frank, to give a 1-minute summary of the key 1 or 2 takeaways they would like to share with our national audience today. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I couldn't agree more with Wiley. You look at numerous studies like E3, LVNL, the cheapest, most straightforward way to do it is dedicated pipelines in the long term. We could transport it by car or by rail, but there's risks associated with that too. On highways, I don't even think a hydrogen tanker could go under some bridges based on federal regulations. So there are risks associated, but to Wiley's point again, we've been transporting hydrogen for years. I think there's like 1,600 miles of hydrogen pipelines in the United States. So this isn't something new. I think it's just the distance is going to be something that is, a little bit different in that regard, but there are ways to do it, and we need to have proper regulation to ensure the safety and integrity, if that's regulated utilities or if it's at the federal level. But again, the safety requirements are in place today, and we could grow upon them. And I don't think this should be something that deters us from moving to a hydrogen economy.
Thank you, Nick. Let's go around our final 1 minute each. Frank, minute, key 1 or 2 takeaways you'd like to share, leave with our audience for the day.
So this conversation around a hydrogen economy is not new. I remember there was an article, and I'm telling my age, from 1973 called, in Scientific American, called The Hydrogen Economy. And the idea of that article was to produce hydrogen from nuclear power plants, breeder nuclear power plants through electrolysis through a national system of pipelines. So it's been around for a long time, but right now it's serious. We're moving toward the infrastructure. One thing I would have to say is that there's going to be a lot of questions from the public about hydrogen. It's new to them. We've had a number of public meetings where people ask questions. I don't think very many people remember the Hindenburg, what they know about the Hindenburg. So these questions come up, and I think that we have to be aware of how the public accepts and supports this transition to hydrogen. We need to be out there and engage the public as we move forward. I believe that there are some safety issues and other issues. Hydrogen is a very small molecule, so there's a lot of issues around that, but I think most of these are addressable compared to what we're doing right now with a lot of other energy sources.
Thank you, Frank. The key: public communication, public discourse, scientific, useful information, transparent information to enhance a key understanding, the why this is elevated after 20 years to the priority now that we enjoy today. Maida.
Again, I'd like to echo others here. The key challenge is to create the infrastructure and the price points that can enable hydrogen to be adopted by early adopters, including small businesses. I believe we're moving forward, and I'm really appreciative of you all here with your expertise. Again, there are lots of opportunities. Like Nick mentioned, biogas is actually carbon neutral, and that's actually negative, carbon negative, Nick, that we have a lot of waste laying around, and that's another wide open opportunity for us. Thank you.
Great takeaways. The importance of small entrepreneurial businesses. They're part of the supply chain. Some of the unique issues with renewable natural gas and those opportunities. Wiley, your 1 minute takeaway or two.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for Stephanie and her leadership in having this discussion. The takeaway is exactly that. It's an all of the above strategy that you and Stephanie have been promoting from day one. It's going to take everything that everybody can possibly do every single day to be able to reach these climate goals that we've all set. The leadership at ASBN being supportive of the work that we've been doing since 2017, not to agree, but to understand. And it's opportunities and discussions like this, in listening to Frank and to Nick and to myself, that there's more to do than Nick and Frank can possibly get done, including with our technologies. So if we can get to the point in our country where we can analyze the different opportunities, the price points, and the timelines, and integrate those into what we can do today, what we'll do tomorrow, and then what are the long-term solutions that we can achieve in our country. That's the piece that I would like for everybody to take away. It's an all of the above strategy. Without an all of the above strategy, you're not going to get there.
Thank you, Wiley. We've moved from blue to pink hydrogen, ultimately to green hydrogen. And Nick, you have the last word before we go back to our host, Stephanie at Ohio University.
Perfect. Yeah, and I would just like to thank everyone for allowing me to join the panel, as well as the panelists. I think, three big themes. One, to Wiley's point, is collaboration. And to Frank's point, is we need to work together to develop this economy. If we continue to have different approaches and battle each other, it's never going to happen. The second one is, let's just ensure climate integrity. Let's put the best solutions forward. There's emerging technologies. There's always going to be newer and cleaner solutions that come down the pipe. So that leads it to being adjustability. Don't create policies that hold hydrogen to a higher standard. We need to get there. We need a roadmap to get there to the cleanest solutions to meet our decarbonization goals. So with that, Michael, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Nick. A concluding point there is the importance of openness, the collaboration, but ultimately, a lot of these energy issues have been driven by winner-take-all kind of policies, kind of mentalities, kind of approaches. And I think the general takeaway is the challenge, as Wiley said, is so difficult, so pervasive. The understanding and the richness of the degree of technical understanding Frank has shared with us, and Nick's opportunity in terms of collaboration, Maida's views on coordination. There was a role for everybody, including the supply chain. Instead of winner take all, we need to be focusing on the ways that all can win. Because we're trying to build a strong country, a strong economy, a socioeconomic outcome that's durable and lasting. Stephanie, back to you.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to thank everybody who's been part of the audience and paying attention and interested. And deep thanks to all of the presenters. Wiley, you really framed up what I was thinking as my biggest takeaway. This whole project that we've been doing is about cooperation and not competition. It's about getting information and education out so people can make the best choices. It's about doing what's better now till we can get to what's best, to other technologies that are advanced enough or they're affordable. It's how can we take care of people today, start addressing the climate crisis, growing union jobs, strengthening our middle class. These are all things that are going to grow a stronger country, communities, all the way down. And businesses can thrive in the meantime. So this has been just a really wonderful experience. We want to make sure we can provide diverse opinions and information so that people can be better informed as we move forward together. So with that, I think that's going to conclude our day. So thank you, everybody, for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists, and everybody have a great week and weekend.
Take care.